Control your screaming brat, or I'll have security remove you both from this aircraft immediately." The crack of a palm against a cheek tore through the first-class cabin like a whip. Sandy Miller, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, had just slapped Kayla Thompson, a black mother holding her 6-month-old daughter Zoe against her chest. Zoe jolted, her cry rising into a piercing wail before breaking into hiccups. Phone screens lit up. Lenses swung toward the scene. "Finally, someone with a backbone," muttered an elderly woman in pearls, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Kayla didn't respond. She simply pulled the small blanket tighter around her baby, her hand trembling, her gaze calm and steady. On her lap lay a boarding pass marked Mrs. K. Thompson, with a special gold code, something Sandy had ignored as if it didn't exist. Sandy smoothed her uniform, the silver wings on her lapel flashing under the cold light. Facing the cabin, she announced crisply, "First-class passengers, we apologize for the disruption. Some people don't understand basic courtesy when flying." A few murmurs of approval followed, like knuckles rapping on a wooden table. A businessman in a black suit scoffed, "Good thing someone's keeping standards. These people always think they can get away with anything." Across the aisle, Jenna Lee, a short-haired college student, raised her phone high. "Everyone, the flight attendant just slapped a mother holding a baby. I'm live." Viewer numbers surged from hundreds to thousands, then tens of thousands. Comments streamed, "Exactly. Teach these noisy moms a lesson. Flight attendant is a hero. That lady looks so entitled." Kayla rocked Zoe gently, letting the baby chew on her pinky finger. The small act should have softened the room, but here it only drew more irritated glares. Sandy's radio hissed, "Captain, code yellow in first. Passenger with infant refusing instructions. Recommend deplane. Already 8 minutes delay." Captain Eric Wilson's voice came back, calm but icy. "Copy. What's your proposal?" "Remove her now, sir." Kayla's phone buzzed. "Corporate legal merger announcement, 2 p.m. EST. All systems ready." She dismissed it before Sandy could glance over. "Excuse me," Kayla whispered, barely audible. "My seat is 2A. "Sweetheart," Sandy sneered, "I don't care what trick you used to sneak in here. People like you always try to scam an upgrade. I've seen it all." Kayla reached into her bag for formula. A flash of platinum. A uniquely designed card nestled between diapers and bottles, placed there as if by accident. Her phone vibrated again. "Skylink Airways Executive Office," flashed across the screen, vanishing when she declined the call. Sandy narrowed her eyes. "Who you calling? Think your baby daddy can save you from federal aviation regulations?" Laughter rippled. Eric's voice cut in over the intercom. "Boarding closes in 10 minutes. Crew to positions." The countdown thudded like a judge's gavel. In Seat 3C, Greg Barnes, a frequent flyer in the industry, opened his laptop and posted on a professional forum. "Witnessing discrimination in real time. Skylink 847. Passenger far too calm to fit disruptive description." Jenna's live feed caught the cabin lights gleaming on Sandy's wings, lingering on the red mark etched into Kayla's cheek. She added a caption, "First class is on fire." Sandy lifted her chin, voice unwavering. 6 minutes, ground security to main door." Through the window, blue and red lights of security vehicles approached like swarming fire ants. The air thickened, dry and brittle. Kayla pulled the blanket higher over Zoe, pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead, and whispered something too soft for any microphone to catch. When she raised her head, her eyes were unnervingly serene, enough to unsettle a few passengers, as if the balance of power was about to shift. 4 minutes, Sandy reminded, smiling into Jenna's camera like an actress ready for her final cue. Kayla glanced at the back of her black watch, engraved with the words, "To my brilliant wife, MT." She closed her eyes for one steady breath. The boarding clock ticked on. The cabin waited, cameras held steady, and Zoe stopped crying. Eric Wilson pulled back the curtain, the 4 gold stripes on his shoulder a marker of authority. Status, Sandy? Female passenger with infant, disruptive, non-compliant, refuses to deplane. Eric's eyes swept quickly. A black woman, smooth leather diaper bag, seat 2A, every bias in him snapping neatly into the story Sandy had already framed. "Ma'am," he said, voice commanding, "FAR requires passengers to comply with crew instructions for safety." Jenna whispered into her live stream, "Captain's here, 15,000 watching." From the galley, 2 plainclothes air marshals emerged, Ben Rogers and Todd Johnson. No badges needed. Their stance gave them away to trained eyes. What had started as a customer service dispute now escalated into a security flashpoint. Nature of the incident, Ben asked. Passenger non-compliant, refusing deplane, assessed as disruptive by crew, Eric replied, sharp and final. In 3C, Greg paused his typing, raised his phone to snap a photo. His earlier forum post already had 200 shares, comments flooding. Any log? Audio? Sandy lifted the PA mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay due to one uncooperative passenger. The matter will be resolved shortly." Instantly, a wall of sound broke. "Kick her off. I have a connection. So inconsiderate." Jenna's counter shot to 25K. Breaking news alerts pinged across local apps. Kayla clutched Zoe tighter, eyes never meeting the cameras. "I need 5 minutes," she told Ben softly. "You need 0 minutes," Eric cut in. "This is a federal aircraft under my command." Mrs. Whitmore sat upright, raising her voice deliberately. "I've flown 60 years, and this kind of entitlement is what's ruining modern air travel." Nods followed, indifferent to whether a newborn was exhausted or in pain from pressure. They only wanted a narrative to agree with. Kayla whispered, "Just 5 minutes." Ben hesitated, instinct tugging. "If you have documentation or valid—" "No negotiation," Eric snapped, waving his hand. "Remove her now." Sandy lifted her chin. "This is why protocol exists." Phones went higher, faces tilted, anticipating a forced removal. Outside the window, security vehicles drew closer. Blue and red lights blinked in their own rhythm. Countdown hammered, 6, 5, 4 minutes. "We're live," Jenna gasped. Greg switched from forum to Twitter, posting, "Skylink 847. Crew behavior inconsistent with de-escalation protocol. Passenger calm, infant settled." Kayla glanced at her daughter. Zoe had stopped crying, her tiny hand brushing Sandy's silver wings like a cold star. Kayla tapped her phone. Skylink corporate emergency line flashed, then disappeared as she declined again, setting it face down like she wasn't ready. Sandy pressed her lips thin. "Who keeps calling you? Your baby daddy can't override federal law." A few chuckles popped like bubbles. 3 minutes, Eric said, voice like a slamming door. "Ground security boarding now." An officer entered first class, tone flat. "By order of the captain and air marshals, please disembark voluntarily." Necks craned, phones zoomed on Kayla. One officer's hand brushed the edge of his cuffs like an accident. Ben shifted behind, eyes fixed on the child. A current of wrongness ran through him. Kayla kissed Zoe's forehead, whispered again, then raised her head into the cameras. 2 minutes, she said. "Time's up," Eric barked. "Proceed." The officer stepped closer, hand reaching for Kayla's seatbelt. Jenna swallowed hard. 32,000 watching. Oh. Greg froze, fingers hovering. Ben began. "If she has, remove now," Eric snapped, voice like cutting a mooring line. Kayla touched her phone, pressed speaker without looking. "Hi, honey. I'm having some trouble on your airline." The cabin froze. A man's voice rang out, calm and steel-edged. "Which flight are you on, love? I'll handle this right now." And Eric Wilson knew that voice. Everyone at Skylink did. The voice of the man who signed their paychecks. Flight 847, first class. Crew's been improvising with passenger service. Kayla spoke evenly, still holding Zoe. Everyone step away from my wife now. The man's voice over speaker shifted from calm to absolute command. This is Mark Thompson, CEO of Skylink Airways. The cabin dropped into silence, heavy as a thick curtain. The security officer stepped back. Ben Rogers eased his hand away. Jenna whispered into her live, 45K watching. Plot twist. Eric wavered, like a man missing a step into thin air. Kayla pulled the platinum card from her bag. Embossed letters glittered under the lights. First family. Ownership verification. Mrs. Mark Thompson. She held it up without a word. Cancel the departure, Mark ordered. We've got bigger matters. Ground control answered immediately to the CEO's own voice. All units stand down from 847. Executive Chairman is handling directly. Outside, the red and blue strobes froze, then peeled away. On Jenna's live, numbers shot to 52K, hashtag Skylink scandal exploding. Kayla opened video call. The screen lit up a wood-paneled boardroom, long table, faces of the CFO, head of legal David Park, FAA liaison, a federal counsel, all staring into the camera like into the storm's eye. Mark appeared, dark suit, slim tie, gaze sharp and weary as a man carrying the weight of a major plan. Ms. Miller, he said directly, you slapped my wife in front of 54,000 witnesses. Show me the regulation that authorizes crew to strike a passenger holding an infant. Sandy's mouth opened, then shut again, like someone swallowing a blade. Eric stammered in, broken, Sir, Mr. Thompson, perhaps we can discuss this privately. 47,000 people are watching this conversation. Mark cut him off, eyes unblinking. Privacy ended when you broadcast your conduct onto the internet. Kayla moved to open a file image. Mark shook his head gently. Not yet. David Park flicked a finger across his tablet. Eric Wilson, 7 discrimination complaints in 8 years, average settlement $250K. Sandy Miller, 3 prior bias incidents, remedial training, repeated violations. FAA investigator Sarah Carter en route. Sarah appeared in a small window. 14 CFR About 21580 governs crew conduct toward passengers, clear evidence of violation. Kayla lifted her head. Play cabin audio from boarding to incident? Mark nodded. The loudspeakers rolled back every word like hammer blows. Control your screaming brat. Some people don't know how to travel appropriately. People like you always try to upgrade illegally. Your baby daddy isn't going to save you. Then the crack of the slap, stone hitting a well. Mrs. Whitmore slumped in her seat. Her earlier scolding words clung to her like tar paper under dozens of live cameras. Ben raised his hands, stepping back. Mrs. Thompson, we acted on crew reports, didn't realize it was discrimination. Kayla smiled, not triumph, but the calm recognition of a system's blind spot. That's why independent verification is needed before you lay a hand on anyone. Eric lunged for his final chance. This can be handled internally. Mark's laugh was cold. FAA, DOT, DOJ are all listening. Internal ended the second she was slapped. 3 minutes before this plane was supposed to take off, Greg typed into Twitter. Crew live-streamed their own violations. Jenna whispered, 58K, 60K. Kayla turned her phone, the lens catching Zoe's face, the child now peacefully reaching for Sandy's silver wings, as if for the moon. Have you ever been judged as a bad parent before anyone asked if you needed help? Kayla spoke into the phone, streaming, her voice steady. The question wasn't for first class. It pierced through glass into tens of thousands of living rooms. Cancel the scheduled flight, Mark closed. Hold this aircraft for federal investigation. Sandy stared at her shoes, Eric at his gold wings, like for the last time. No one said sorry, because now an apology wasn't cheap words. It was a case file and a courtroom. Sandy Miller, Eric Wilson, suspended immediately, effective now. Mark's words fell heavy, each syllable like a seal being pressed shut. Sandy broke into sobs. "Please, sir, I have a child, a mortgage." Kayla's gaze cut through, her voice both maternal and sharp as a thin blade. "You chose to slap a mother holding her infant. Choices have consequences." David Park read quickly. Federal assault on an aircraft, battery, civil rights violation, child endangerment, license suspension recommended within 72 hours. Additional civil suits pending. Sarah Carter came forward on screen, not raising her voice, yet the entire cabin stilled. FAA will oversee systemic reforms immediately. Mark shifted the camera. A slide filled the boardroom wall. Family Protection Protocol. Effective immediately across Skylink Airways. The words appeared bold and unflinching. No physical contact with passengers absent direct safety risk. All crew interactions must be audio and video recorded, archived for federal oversight. Discrimination complaints bypass local management, go straight to federal civil rights authorities. Mandatory 40-hour training, bias, de-escalation, passenger rights, failure, termination. Air marshals. Protocol, independent verification required before assisting with any crew-requested enforcement. Ben Rogers asked, "New procedures for marshals if discrimination is suspected?" Mark nodded. Added training and evidence checklists before intervention. Independence from crew narrative is mandatory. The message wasn't to blame the marshals, but to seal the blind spot where authority could be abused. 22 years of service, Eric tried to salvage. 22 years of legitimizing violence under a procedure, Mark replied, not harsh but cutting enough. Outside, urgent news scrolled across financial channels. Skylink down 8% after hours. Inside, Mark's tone shifted. Passenger Bill of Rights, to be published publicly, posted in every cabin, pushed through the app. Passengers can file complaints directly to federal agencies. The next slide bore 3 short lines. Every family belongs here. Respect first. Verification always. Kayla looked at Zoe, then back to the lens. We're not taking this flight anymore. Mark inclined his head slightly, like to a valued customer. The company jet will be ready in 30 minutes. The words were both protection for his wife and child, and a clear line drawn between service and dignity. This aircraft needed to stay behind and absorb the lesson it had just written. The door opened. Federal investigators stepped aboard. Cameras flashed like silent thunder. Sandy walked down the aisle, no applause, no nods, only lenses and written reports. Eric removed the last 2 gold bars from his shoulder, his hand trembling. Zoe laughed, a sound pure as water dripping onto a windowsill and breaking the dense air and bouncing into a new rhythm. 71K, 73K, Jenna whispered. Greg typed, accountability happening in real time. On the boardroom screen, shareholders had joined the call. Mark spoke plainly without spin. Last year revenue $4.2 billion, CSAT 91%. Today, one slap could jeopardize certifications, insurance, $800 million in federal contracts. Therefore, burying this with settlements is no longer an option. We set the standard for the industry. Has anyone, Kayla looked into Jenna's lens, ever asked if you needed help before branding you a bad parent? Heads dropped. Mrs. Whitmore dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The businessman in the black suit quietly lowered his phone. Ben stood straighter. Todd let his shoulders loosen. Above them, the LED lights still glowed white as always, but the air had changed. The language of air travel was being rewritten. In just 4 hours, Skylink, turned crisis into reform. Sandy Miller was led away in handcuffs through the terminal, her mugshot spreading across every news site. Eric Wilson was stripped of his stripes the moment he stepped off the jet bridge. Jenna's live stream peaked at 89,000 viewers. later climbing to 47 million combined views within weeks. But the story didn't stop at virality. It moved into the courts, the markets, Congress, and the culture of air travel itself. An emergency board convened within 2 hours. Mark faced shareholders live on air. "We will no longer buy silence through settlements. Thomson standards will be the standard." Within 24 hours, 40-hour training began. Every Family Belongs Here signs appeared in every cabin. Direct-to-federal reporting protocols were deployed. The FAA issued a preliminary statement. The Skylink incident exposes systemic discrimination patterns in commercial aviation. Reform is mandatory. The DOT and DOJ launched parallel investigations. 3 months later, Sandy's trial brimmed with evidence. Multiple camera angles, cabin audio, time-stamped logs, witnesses. 89,000 people had seen it live. Verdict: 18 months federal prison plus 5 years probation. Eric was convicted as complicit, guilty of safety violations, stripped of his license and pension. Skylink's stock fell 11% before rebounding within a week, as investors recognized authentic reform rebuilt genuine trust. Within 6 months, revenue climbed by 23%. CSAT reached 97% among diverse family travelers. Corporate clients proactively shifted contracts. Competitors scrambled to draft similar protocols, fearing their cameras might be next. Jenna Lee, the college student who accidentally became history's camera woman, created the series 35,000 AFT Discrimination in the Sky, won awards, and lobbied through the Airline Accountability Act, mandatory transparency on complaint data, compulsory training, independent oversight. IATA incorporated Thomson standards into recommendations. 17 countries ratified Family Protection Protocol. Within 2 years, airline discrimination complaints dropped 67%. At Harvard classrooms, the Skylink 847 case became a flagship lesson in crisis reform transparency. Ben Rogers and Todd Johnson returned to training halls, recounting the blind spot of air marshals who only listened to crew narratives. They became speakers for courses on identifying crew-initiated discrimination. Greg Barnes was nominated for a Pulitzer for reporting in the right place at the right time. In Skylink's own training materials, phrases like "people like you" vanished. The required opening line became, "How can I help your family travel comfortably?" Posters behind every seat read clearly, "No physical contact unless for direct safety risk." Record all interactions. Bypass local management for discrimination complaints. The Family Travel Foundation, founded by Kayla and Mark, processed 847 cases in its first 2 years, a number that seemed destined by the flight number, and won 100% of them. On stage at the NACP, Kayla accepted the Courage Award, saying simply, "Dignity doesn't require power to be respected. Today, it doesn't need to, because everyone has seen it." Zoe grew up, sometimes falling asleep on her father's shoulder during business trips, sometimes sprinting down private jet hallways, sometimes waving at flight attendants who competed to bring her a teddy bear. On the very aircraft where the incident had happened, Skylink installed advanced audiovisual monitoring and a bias detection algorithm. The plane became the flagship of passenger dignity. Every day, new videos emerged. A flight attendant kneeling to tie an old woman's shoelaces, a pilot walking a colicky baby down the aisle so the mother could rest, an air marshal pausing to ask, "Do you need help?" before anyone could label a parent disruptive. At the end of each video, the same question Kayla had once asked in first class appeared. "Have you ever been judged as a bad parent before anyone asked if you needed help?" Responses flooded in like a river in flood season. Yes, too many times, and now it's different. One quiet afternoon, Kayla stood by the window watching Zoe sketch crooked flight paths on paper. Mark called from the office. "Time to go. Family flight leaves in 15 minutes. Kayla smiled, folding her daughter's light shawl. At the aircraft door, a young flight attendant placed her hand over her heart and bowed slightly. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Thompson. How can I help your family travel comfortably today? Kayla paused mid-step, hearing the new language flow through the cabin like a calm melody. She nodded. Thank you. Just a quiet place for my daughter to sleep. And when Zoe rested her head on her mother's shoulder, the engine's steady hum outside sounded like the heartbeat of a world reset to normal. Before she closed her eyes, Zoe giggled. One day, grown, she would read in books that once her laughter had echoed at just the right moment for an empire to learn to say, "Respect first." From a slap in first class to an industry-wide family protection standard, Kayla and Zoe's story reminds us that dignity is not a privilege. It is a standard to be respected, recorded, safeguarded, and enforced. When power is misused, transparency and evidence will drag it back into place. When "people like you" is used to label, "How can I help your family travel comfortably?" must be the first line spoken. That day, one plane was grounded, but a new culture took flight. Respect first, verify always. Every family belongs here. Question for you. Have you ever been judged as a bad parent or treated unfairly before anyone even asked if you needed help? Share your story in the comments. If this story touched you, hit like, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe with the bell on so you won't miss the next story.